Nerdcast assemble!
Stay dandy, baby.
When it comes to fan service, I'm kind of a cheap date. I'm a simple guy. Give me a bunch of people dressed as hardcore badass Mandalorians going toe-to-toe with some Mon Calamari pirates, and basically, I'm on board, baby. This is just gravy on top of my biscuit, and this was an amazing episode of The Mandalorian. Easily, without a shadow of a doubt, the best episode thus far. The fact that I say that with every single review is a sign that this show still manages to be just as entertaining and as enduring as when it made its big splash last year in 2019. But now it's time to blast off into the future, a future which consists of some classic Clone Wars and Rebels characters making their live-action debut. Not to mention, we get to see the most stable relationship in the Star Wars universe. Yeah, it's not frickin' Han or Leia, it's Frog Lady and Frogman. Initially, I thought this episode was going to consist of a much larger story, all about the Mandalorian trying to save the Frog Lady, but basically this just ended up being a forward pass to the next major story arc here, where Mando and the Frog Lady just barely make it to this mysterious planet which is covered head to toe with Mon Calamari of all varieties, and I know that Star Wars fans are certainly going to eat that up. Just the process of entering this planet is a thrilling sequence in and of itself. Basically, Mando's ship is barely holding together after surviving the terrors of the Ice Spider planet, and right as they're making their way into port, basically the entire ship looks like it's just about to go up into flames, and when they just barely manage to land, the ship just falls over into the freaking water. You can practically hear the chorus in the background going. But almost immediately, that whole story arc ends, with Mando giving the eggs to the Frog Lady and Frogman. They're reunited, and they go and have some good froggy time together. Wink, wink. That's right, that frog is about to fertilize some eggs. Let's see what Rule 34 can do with this one. The next part of the episode is strikingly similar to the first episode of the series, where Mando walks into a bar, wants to get some information about where to find some Mandalorians, and luckily he ends up finding a tip. The problem is this tip just happens to be a group of freaking pirates who seem to want to kill Mandalorian, take his armor, and even feed Baby Yoda to a massive undersea creature known as a Mammocore. And I have to admit, this is a pretty tense and scary situation. I don't know how the Mandalorian was actually going to get out of this if it wasn't for the help of a couple of other random Mandalorians who managed to show up in this episode, and they might look kinda familiar. Get ready for the live-action introduction of Bo-Katan, a character who appeared in Star Wars Clone Wars and Rebels, who was voiced in those series by Katie Sackhoff, and she also happens to be played by Katie Sackhoff. This is such an awesome fact. It's so rare that anything like this actually gets to happen, and it makes her character feel all the more perfect, because it is her. Katie Sackhoff does a great job of making her seem like the overly confident, super cool character that she has always been. Being a little over the top in some ways, but honestly, that's what I like about her character and her group of Mandalorians. And this is a pretty big deal for one other big reason, as it finally clears up that one gaping plot hole from the entire series, which is the Mandalorian and his group never seem to take off their helmets. Well, that's apparently because they're a part of some religious Mandalorian zealots who go by the name of the Watch. So this is the group that Mando is actually from. And then, of course, you have this more old school type of group, which is led by Bo-Katan, which has no problem in casually taking off their helmets. They also seem to just do things in a completely different way. But you can see that there's always been a little bit of a difference between these various Mandalorian groups, and I'm glad that they finally brought that into the live-action part of the show, as it could lead to so many other amazing potential storylines in the future. So Mando is saved by the Mandalorian Boy Scouts, and he doesn't really want to do anything with them anymore. He decides to leave and do what he does best, which is go kill someone or go to a bar. But on the way, he ends up getting ambushed by a bunch of Mon Calamari, which means, of course, we get to see the return of Bo-Katan and her Mandalorian followers, and it basically is just Star Wars porn. That's basically what this whole episode is here. Just watching these characters in these really cool costumes fight against aliens and stormtroopers. It's so stupid simple, but man, it just works. After this, Bo-Katan and her group manage to butter up Mandalorian, where they actually get him involved in a mission where they're going to raid this brand new Neo Empire group's ship so they can steal all of their weapons and potentially the entire vessel itself. And essentially, it just leads to the big action scene of the episode, which is nothing short of brilliant. Just watching Mando and Bo-Katan's group go up against all of these stormtroopers is just awesome. It's almost like watching a fan fiction in some senses, but man, it's one I can totally get behind, if only because the imagery itself is so cool. And, you know, even with the return of these really classic characters, the ones that I've seen before that have really unique and awesome looking Mandalorian armor, seeing them stand next to Mando really shows how different they really are, not only in ideologies, but simply of just how they carry themselves. The actual group run by Bo-Katan have these more royal-looking suits, which are very trimmed and very tight and clean. And then you have the Mandalorians, who definitely gives off more of that sort of like wanderer effect, that Boba Fett kind of look. And Mando's outfit, I still think might be the coolest Mandalorian outfit I've ever seen. The current Beskar armor, the mix of black and silver, just looks so damn awesome, and it always looks great on screen. The other group, Bo-Katan's group, almost look like cosplayers when compared to the Mando, just because of how their costumes seem to be a little more overdone in some senses. Now, that's not a negative or a knock on the show. I absolutely love the design of these costumes, and like I said, watching them sneak their way to the ship and just body their way through all of these stormtroopers is kind of like taking that one scene of Vader in Rogue One where he killed all of the rebels and just making it into like a 20-minute action sequence. There are so many amazing moments in this sequence. I think the standout, however, has got to be when Mando and the other Mandos decide to make their way to the interior of the ship, and little by little it looks like they're going to try and trap them between some doors, but somehow they end up tricking all of these frickin' Empire chumps and end up opening up the cargo bay door, which just sends them flying. It is also worth mentioning in this episode that this ship is led by a guy who's working directly under Moff Gideon, who finally makes his first major appearance in the episode, but only as a hologram. But it's a pretty important moment here, because it shows how crazy these guys really are. Moff Gideon knows that all of their weapons and ship is about to be stolen, and there's nothing they can do about it, so the only course of action is to nosedive directly into the ocean and destroy everything in the process. For the glory of the Empire, so to speak. And it's a really disturbing and freaky moment, and again makes for another great action sequence where Mando and his group are making through, still fighting stormtroopers as this ship is just dovetailing into destruction, and it leads to, again, another just amazing moment of watching Mandalorian hold on to these two bombs as he runs into a barrage of stormtroopers who are trying to kill him like frickin' Clarence Bogater from frickin' RoboCop. He takes these hits, he falls to his knees, and he throws those damn bombs at those stormtroopers, and again, like I said, it feels like Star Wars fan fiction, but my god, am I lapping it up like a hungry dog. Luckily, the Mandos are able to take control of the ship, and that's when Bo-Katan decides to put on her interrogation kick-ass boots, as she manages to interrogate the captain of the ship, wanting to know about the location of the Darksaber and how Moff Gideon got it. Now, this is a pretty big freaking deal. Ever since the end of the last season, we got the reveal that Moff Gideon does seem to have the Darksaber. The Darksaber is incredibly important to Mandalorian lore and history, and fans of Star Wars, Clone Wars, and Rebels will definitely know all about this. But the fact that they're actually bringing this into The Mandalorian is remarkably interesting, and even if we don't get too much payoff from it, I think it's just a great way to connect both of these series together. I mean, Bo-Katan was already awesome. Just seeing her in live-action form, that was a big deal. But getting to learn little about the Darksaber, I think, is something that's really got me excited for the rest of the series. But then the captain of the ship does something ridiculous. He essentially bites down on a electrical cyanide tablet, which basically just electrocutes his face and kills him. So it means no answer about the Darksaber. And so, basically, the episode ends with Bo-Katan desperately wanting Mandalorian to leave the Watch and join their group and help them out on their mission to take back the Darksaber. But he's like, nah, I gotta take care of this little moneymaker right here. Oh yeah, there's also one other thing about this episode that I think is really great. Baby Yoda seems to have redeemed himself after eating all of Frog Lady's eggs in the last episode of the series, which apparently a lot of people had a lot of problem with this. People were very upset by this, and all I can really say is that you guys are a bunch of pansies. If you were hoping that Baby Nuggies was going to redeem himself, well, it looks like he does do it in this episode. About halfway through the episode, Mando decides he's going to drop off the child with the Frog Lady and the Frogman, and you almost think that, oh no, this is going to lead to another scene of Yoda just completely wiping out this species by eating the eggs of the Frog Lady, but no, he actually sees that one of them hatches, and instead he's kind of fascinated by this new little creature. But let's talk about the biggest name drop of the entire episode, because Mando decided to work along along with Bo-Katan, he gets to know the location of a Jedi who could tell him a little bit of information about what's going on with Baby Yoda. Well, it just so happens that Jedi is none other than Ahsoka Tano. Now, she's been rumored to appear multiple times in this season, and it's almost been 100% confirmed that she's going to be played by Rosario Dawson, so I'm very interested to see this character, as she's arguably one of the biggest characters to come from the animated Star Wars universe. I mean, she's clearly the standout character of Star Wars Clone Wars, especially in the final season, and it makes me so glad that that final season only released, I believe, last year, because being able to see those characters there and get to see where they are now is, I think, what really made this episode work for me. It felt like a perfect extension of what those animated series are, while at the same time still feeling like The Mandalorian, which is a fun, gritty, Western-style Star Wars show, and this episode right here absolutely played to its strengths. What's the rundown on this episode of The Mandalorian? This is the best episode of the season thus far, and one of my favorite episodes from the entire series, reveling in its simplicity, but having fun in how creative things can actually be. What I mean by that is just, I love how they can play at the heartstrings of your nostalgia for Star Wars, while also at the same time still giving you something kind of new and interesting. I mean, everything that you want from Star Wars is here, but it's the type of adventures that they're presenting to us that always manage to be an absolute blast. And I think a lot of that, again, is just owed to the amazing design and production value of this show. Everything from the smallest details of the fact that a massive crane on this Mon Calamari planet is basically a reconstructed walker. The Mon Calamari species are really fun because of how outrageous they look, and we got to see a lot of them and their culture in this episode. It's always interesting to see those two distinctive members of that species come together and interact with one another. You can still see that there is something of a bit of separation between them, but again, it's the type of thing that people who really love like the deeper lore of the Star Wars universe are really going to appreciate, as we're getting to see it right here in live action, and it's really damned awesome. And that effect never seems to get lost on me. It was made even more clear with the return of Bo-Katan, which was something I did not expect to see from this season. And again, like I said, it highlighted that there are various groups of Mandalorians. So for people who are loving The Mandalorian and not really gotten into Star Wars all that much, I'm glad that they're at least establishing this so that they can sort of learn a little bit more about the interesting lore of these people, which has been told at length in various other mediums of Star Wars. But this is the show that's really giving us a more deep dive into what this entire Mandalorian thing is all about. And I just can't wait to see if we're going to see other various Mandalorian groups. It opens up so many other doors for the future of the show. And for people who just simply like those characters, I mean, this is just the perfect show for that. I hate to say it, like I said, I'm something of a cheap date. Show me some Mandalorian armor and I'm all over it. But yeah, this is what this was all about the entire time. I found myself geeking out during just about every major sequence that involved Bo-Katan teaming up with Mando. It was surreal to finally see these characters in live action. It's surreal that Katie Sackhoff, of all people who does her voice, is playing that character. That is freaking amazing. I really hope they can do that for some of the other characters in the series if they decide to bring them into live action. But still, it worked and she seemed natural, and I knew who she was immediately the minute her helmet was taken off. That's how distinctive that character design is and how much it actually worked in this episode right here. It gives me so much hope to see what Ahsoka is going to be all about. I think that's going to be, one of the biggest moments of the entire franchise at this point. I never believed we would see Ahsoka Tano in live action, but this is it. This is finally going to happen, baby, and I'm very excited for all of it. So, there's one other little thing I want to talk about, and that's Baby Yoda in this episode. Again, they're always going to have to find some sort of way to keep him out of the picture if they want Mando to go into these intense action sequences without constantly having to worry about him, and luckily, this episode's worked really well. And it made up for the fact that Baby Yoda was eating all those frog eggs. Here, I was almost fearing that it could potentially happen again. Watching everybody react to it, I think, would have been my favorite part, to be perfectly honest. I'm a bit of a sadist, I guess, in terms of that. But even this small moment managed to give a little bit of development to his character, or at least whatever sort of development you can give to an infant. And before I mention it, I'm not sure if the two Mandalorians that are working with Bo-Katan are anyone important? It's kind of hard to say. I don't remember characters like this from the TV, and if I do, I'm sorry, I forgot about you. When I actually saw that girl with the hood for the very first time, I thought that she could have been maybe Sabine Wren. Maybe they're going to put her in the series at some point. They kind of have to. They are going to have to introduce her character eventually. I mean, she's so important to the history of the Mandalorians, and considering if I believe she was the one who had the Darksaber last, it means even more. So there's just so much more to actually see from this show. But again, if you were just thirsting for more of that Mandalorian lore and seeing a lot more of those characters in action in this episode, this is the one that's going to do it for you. For me, like I said, I think this was the strongest episode of the entire season and one of my favorite episodes overall. I just loved this one so damn much. As someone who's been following Star Wars, not only in the movies, but also books and TV shows and everything, this is the type of episode that almost feels like a reward for watching all of that stuff, and it's a reward that I can really get behind, and it certainly worked. It was another fun, action-packed, cheesy, but great episode of The Mandalorian. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. It was freaking awesome. Oh, and one more fun fact. This episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, and I believe this is the second episode of the series that she has directed thus far, and so far, I like her work. Her episodes always manage to be really entertaining and play at the core of what people really love about the Star Wars universe. But that's my final thoughts, Mandos and Mandettes. Let me get your thoughts about this episode of The Mandalorian, Chapter 11, The Heiress. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Were you really surprised by the big arrival of Bo-Katan and her group, the revelations about the possibility of seeing the Darksaber, and oh yeah, Ahsoka freaking Tano finally making her way into the live-action Star Wars universe? Give me all your thoughts about that and your hopes and dreams for the future of The Mandalorian. So thank you guys so much for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel for more Mandalorian reviews, as well as a ton of other anime reviews of shows that I'm looking at, as well as discussions and Patreon reviews and all that really cool stuff. Make sure before you leave to hit that like button. Use your Mandalorian gauntlet to make it happen if that's what it takes. Just please help out this video a lot. It'll ensure that more people will get to see my content as it is released. And I would also like to thank all of my Patreon supporters. You guys are just freaking awesome. I love you guys so much for not only watching my content, but the fact that every month you are willingly donating to the channel. Remember, first-time donators, I will review an anime series of your choice, as well as adding your name to the wall of the producers of Ace Guru. Thank you guys so much. So there it is, my friends. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay dandy, baby.